Is it?
Just a second. Okay. Can someone share the
I will.
textbook?
I will.
Thank you so much. Good evening, people. How are you all doing?
Good, Vasudha. Thank you for asking.
Nice to hear that. Okay, today's topic for us is assessment of personality, and our objectives for today will be defining personality assessment, explaining the prominent features of personality assessment, explaining the aims of personality assessment, explaining the various methods used in the assessment of personality, differentiating between different types of tools that are used in personality assessment, explaining projective types in detail and objective techniques in detail, right? So first we'll start with the assessment of personality, that is the definition of personality assessment. Personality assessment is the evaluation of factors such as intelligence, skills, interests, aptitudes, creative abilities, attitudes, and facets of psychological development by a variety of methods and techniques. Now, there are three different types that we are going to use, or three different techniques that we generally use when you're assessing someone's personality. And they are your observational methods, in which you observe the other person, be it their body language, the way they talk, their facial expressions, the temperament of the words they're using, the type of words they're using, and all that. Personality in inventories are inventories or questionnaires that usually are given to a person to answer. Projective types are such as your Rorschach ink blot test and your thematic apperception test, which use pictures and uh, other visual aid to help the client or the patient or the interviewee tell you what is exactly going on in their mind. Now, this actually sums up your entire chapter in a brief this thing, because this is all what your chapter is about. It is just that we're going to go into detail about each of these techniques. The use of personality, that means the personality assessment is used in numerous ways. It is also used in clinical evaluation of children and adults. It is used highly in the educational system and vocational counseling, and in industries and organizational settings, as well as in rehabilitation. Now, each of them have a different purpose, right? Personality assessment in childhood and general adulthood is to know where you stand. If you have a good personality, bad personality, if you have a very extroverted personality, introverted personality. As we know from the previous class, there are so many types of personalities, and we're trying to find out what where you a person fits in educational system, is to see what kind of a temperament or characteristic they have towards the studies, or where they lie in their intelligences, or how they're using their intelligences, because that also influences your personality. Your in vocational counseling, it's because if you're counseling someone, even as a part time, you have to be in a very stable, you have to be emotionally stable enough to counsel another person. Or even if you're not emotionally or if you're a little excitable, you need to know how to control yourself. So this is how you learn where to control yourself or adjust yourself. In industries and other organizational settings, is to basically know if the employee is capable enough to handle a particular task, or if he can work under pressure, if he cannot work under pressure. All this is done through personality assessment. Again, all this is heavily influenced on your personality, uh, influenced by your personality. In rehabilitation, if you're taking someone who's mentally not so stable, then you give them a personality assessment test in order to find out which area you have to spend a little more time and help them regain their stability. We move on to the needs and aims of assessment. Traditionally, tests were employed only to measure individual differences or intra-individual reactions under different circumstances. The nature and extent of individual differences and their possessed psychological traits and differences among various groups, etc., are becoming some of the major components or demanding assessment as an aid of measurement. Which means when you're in the society or when you're in with different groups, or to how what kind of an extent you differ from another person also needs to be known. So if a psychologist is trying to find out how different you are within a proper group, or your group, what is the difference between a group of friends also, they try to give them a personality assessment test to find out how different you are from another person. This is a small example, right? Personality testing is an essential prerequisite for identifying the various constituents of personality. Testing in personality provides measures of emotional and motivational traits of a personality. So, personality assessment doesn't only talk about your personality, right? It also tells you how motivated you are towards your goal, because motivations also influence your personality. Methods of personality assessment. As we've seen, we've gone through the three major types of techniques that we use to assess people. That is your observational methods, your personality inventories, and your projective techniques, right? So, whatever the some of the most important tests and techniques that you can use are your interviews and interviews. This is amongst your observational methods. Now, things like behavior sampling, interviews, and rating scales are a part of your observational methods. Projective techniques is where you use pictures and ink blots to suggest or start the client on telling you what everything he needs to say. Associative techniques and expressive techniques are also a part of your um, personality inventories. But we'll go into that a little bit. Interviews, it is directed it is a directed conversation in which a researcher or a therapist or a clinical employer or interviewer intends to elicit specific information from an individual, that is your interviewee or your client, for the purposes of research, diagnosis, treatment, and employment. Again, here they're going through clinical counseling as well as your OB. They are conducted face to face or by telephone or online. Interviews may be either standardized, including a set of questions, or open ended, varying on the material introduced in responses by your interviewee. So the type of interview that you take also depends on like who you're talking to, what you're talking about. If you want to ask them a set of questions that has a yes or no answer, even that gives a very it gives you a very detailed information of the person in front of you, right? There are, however, limitations towards your interviews. Interviews by psychologists demand the report of innermost feelings, concerns, urges on the past of the client. However, these can be known directly by the client or the interviewee. The problem, however, is when the self reports are encountered, and you need to know data like suppose you go for a survey or something, they might not give you proper information. They can lie, they can misinform, they can change the facts to suit their own mindset. The reality is not given to you. They can hide the true information for social desirability. Suppose you have an aptitude test, or you have a statement saying kicking a puppy is correct. Okay, this is just an example. I'm very against it. So if you want to know the mindset of a person, you'll be like, kicking a puppy is okay in in your questionnaire, and the person will be like, oh my god, no, people will think bad of me even though I enjoy doing this. So I will write, no, I do not like kicking a puppy. Kicking a puppy is wrong. So this is something that they do to um, change the true information for social desirability. One of the major examples I can give you of hiding true information for social desirability is changing the Indian history in order to suit all the cultures that we have in here. There is a huge and very rich history that India has, which is generally not given in the raw format to the children these days. It is being sugar coated and changed for political ambitions by the politicians and the educational system, right? This is one of the major things that you can say is the example for hiding true information for social desirability. Biases can occur on the part of the interviewers as their personal belief system or prejudice may put obstacles in the interpretation of the information given by the interviewee. Now, I am taking an interview of some person. Say I'm taking an interview of Ritu or Ritika or someone. The way I interpret it, the way I understand it, is also going to change the information that I'm receiving. So, suppose say I'll be like, this person is helping everybody that this person can. I can say, oh my God, does this person have no other work apart from this? He's doing a good thing, but I'm interpreting it as he's a jobless person. This can be an example for misinterpreting something. That is on the interviewer's side. There's something called as a halo effect. Halo effect is the tendency to form a favorable or an unfavorable impression of someone at the first meeting. And after their first impression, all the comments and behavior of the person are interpreted in an agreement with the impression. Suppose, say, I am going into an interviewer's office and I'm very, very clumsy, or I'm not properly dressed on that particular day because someone spilled a coffee on me when I was walking into a coffee shop. Or suppose, say, I had to come from, come walking from a longer distance and I'm sweating profusely in the dress that I'm wearing. The first impression, the minute the interviewer sees me, is going to be of that the person is very untidy. The person doesn't care about their appearance, or the person doesn't care about themselves. How is he going to care about the company that they're working in? So that impression is always going to be there. No matter how much I've taught the interview, the person will be like, no, this person, though she's given the right answers for everything, is compatible with the company. Later on, after I join the company and I'm trying to work or something, the first impression always uh, changes their opinion about me. No matter how good I am later on, how well dressed I am, or how proper I am in the office, they'll be like, no, this person is just trying to act like this, but they're not like this. It changes the way the person, the interviewer, looks at me. Okay. Those who make a good first impression due to clothing, physical appearance, or some other characteristics seem to have a halo for everything they do in a positive light. That means, suppose say I'm extremely well dressed. Suppose I'm extremely, my physique is amazing, and I'm going into an interview or an office, and the first time they see me, they'll be like, "Oh, this person is very awesome." Even if I try to steal something, suppose I try to steal something in the office and I get caught doing it, they'll be like, "No, this person is a very good person. Why are you unnecessarily trying to blame them?" So that is how it works. Next, we move on to your projective techniques. Any assessment procedure that consists of a series of relatively ambiguous stimuli designed to elicit unique, sometimes highly idiosyncratic responses that reflect the personality, cognitive style, and other physical characteristics of the respondent. For example, it is not there in the textbook. I've taken this from the APA dictionary. Rorschach ink blot test and the thematic apperception test, as well as your sentence completion, word association, and drawing test. These are all techniques that are assumed to reveal the real central aspects of the personality that lie in the unconscious mind of the individual. So when you talk about a Rorschach test, no, what is it? Your Rorschach ink blot test is where there's a particular design on the piece of paper, that piece of paper or the card that is given to you. You're supposed to say if it looks like a dancing ballerina, or if it looks like a butterfly, or if it looks like a spider that is squashed, or an insect that is squashed. It looks like a blood stain. It all depends on how your subconscious is perceiving this particular piece of iconic information that you're getting, right? The or the visual information you're getting, it all is in your subconscious. So that subconscious information or your unconscious information is coming out when you're looking at this particular picture or the ink blot, and that is how you're assessed. This techniques sorry the, this tech Okay. Unconscious motivation, hidden desires, inner fears, and complexes are presumed to be elicited by their unstructured nature that affect the client's conscious behavior. An unstructured task is one that permits an endless range of possible responses. Test materials or structures are perceived and interpreted by the individual which reflects the fundamental aspects of her or his psychological functioning. That means whatever subconscious idea that you have towards this particular Rorschach ink blot test, or your TAT test, or your sentence completion test, or your word association test, these are all things that come out from your subconscious. So all these represent your inner desires, your greatest fears, your anxieties. All these are represented in your projection technique. Okay, let's move on to the next type. It is the classification of projective techniques. There are about five ways you can okay, there are five various types of projective techniques that have been classified. Your constructive, constitutive, cathartic, interpretative, interpretative, and refractive. What is constructive? Now, constructive includes all those tests and situations where the construction of specific tasks is done by the examinee. The subject needs to frame a structure upon a situation that is presented by the examiner, and be asked to draw a human figure, allowing the person to freely express the examiner's inclination. That means here the interviewer, suppose say I am talking to a client, they're not opening up to me that freely. Okay, so what I do is I give him a situation. I'll be like, boss, this is the situation. What do you think of it? Whatever information that he's putting forward to me is based on whatever information I have given him. So what they'll do is they'll try to put that situation unconsciously or subconsciously into telling what is really there in their brain. So I'll be like, okay, I am drinking water right now. If I give them the situation suppose I am drinking water right now, and whatever they perceive or whatever they understand from that particular thing, and the structure that they put forward to it is based definitely on their subconscious mind, or whatever they're feeling in their subconscious level. Constitutive is the category which includes those tests which require the examinee to constitute structures upon a given unstructured material. For example, your Rorschach ink blot technique. And in this test, the examinee imposes own structure upon the unstructured ink blots. Okay, so here it is pretty clear. We've already spoken about this constitutive type of projective technique, where you're shown certain photos or certain ink blots from which you have to interpret. Cathartic is it includes those situations where the examinee can release his wishes, inner demands, conflicts, etc., through some manipulative tasks. Suppose, say, I think hypnosis is something that can do as a cathartic therapy type of a thing, because when the person is under the influence of hypnosis, they generally come out with their deepest, darkest secrets. And it is said that a person cannot be hypnotized until unless they're willing to get hypnotized. Okay, interpretative. Interpretative includes those test situations where the examinee has to add detailed meaning to the given situation. Suppose, say, you're talking about a particular scenario somewhere, and you're asking the client as to what he interprets out of it, you're asking a meaning. Suppose, say, you're taking a abstract painting, and you show it to the your client. You'll be like, you can ask him what it means. So he'll be like, oh, this particular thing means this particular stroke means that the person is thinking this way. All this is how he interprets the particular painting that I've shown him. Refractive, and this category includes all those techniques through which the examinee gets the opportunity to depict his personality in the form of drawings, paintings, etc. These are particularly those kind of therapies where we call the art therapy that Ritika does, right? Ritika is what Ritika does is a refractive type of a therapy, right? Or a refractive type of technique where she uses painting and drawing and other different forms of art to get the person to tell what is there in his mind. If we evaluate Frank's classifications, it is obvious that it consists of several limitations. The biggest one is that according to his classifications, same test can be included in two or more categories, causing considerable overlap. This way, Frank's classification is not a popular classification of projective methods. That means, see, if you look into all the five categories that we spoke about, that is constructive, constitutive, cathartic, interpretative, and refractive, you can see an overlap, right? You're talking about pictures in two different places, either showing or drawing. You're talking about tat in two different places, that is your interpretative and constitutive. These are all overlapping amongst each other. So when you're doing that particular test, you do not know if you're giving the particular assessment to your client, you do not exactly know if it is from this or that. Associative technique. We're moving on to the last of the techniques. Associative technique is where the category includes all those situations where responses are to be given by the examinee in the form of associations which he makes after seeing or listening to the stimulus material. For example, your word association, right? Your word association test is where the examinee is provided with a number of words in the form of a list. So remember your first experiment. Okay, this is the first experiment for our group. The levels of recall or your effect of cueing on recall. There's a list of words that you were given. Okay, and what something similar to that, we give them a list of words, and he has to utter. Okay, he's required to utter the very first word that comes to his mind on listening to the stimulus word. So if I say water, can someone give me the first thing that comes into your mind?
H2O.
Okay, that's not generally not the first thing that
Blue.
comes into mind.
Drink.
Okay, fine. Awesome. So you got so many other words. So if suppose say I say pink, something that comes to your mind?
Rose.
Awesome.
Rose is red, yeah.
Roses are pink too.
Pink.
Soundarya, where are you? Pink. There are pink roses.
No.
and blue on my word.
Mostly. Roses are red, violets are blue, whatever, that thing.
Frog.
Okay. Okay. When I talk about puppies, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Dog.
Cuddle.
Squishy,
See,
squishy.
okay, fine.
Cute,
Who's the one
cute.
who said cuddle? Who's the one who said cuddle?
Mrudula.
Mrudula.
Mrudula ji. So you're thinking about affection. So you're probably thinking about affection towards a particular animal, or you're thinking about affection towards your husband or your children, or whatever it is, right? So the minute you're talking about cuddling, then you'll be like, no, you at that point of time, you're expecting affection from someone or something, right? uh, this is just an example I'm giving you. If it is true, then I'm awesome. No, just kidding, just kidding. Okay, so the examinee provides them a list of words like this, and the examiner provides a list of words like this, and the examinee has to give an associated word that first comes into their mind. Okay, the responses in accordance with the reaction time is used for analysis of personality of the individual. So we get to understand as to what your personality is. So the minute Mrudula ji said cuddle, when I said puppy, she's a loving kind of a person. You can consider her as a very loving kind of a person who thinks about all good things, who thinks about sharing her emotions or sharing the bond between everybody and all that. Bond in the sense friendship and all that. Okay, we move on to the next part of the chapter, which is your ink blot techniques. The ink blot technique consists of two popular techniques, so that is your Rorschach and your Holzman ink blot tests. In these tests, the examinee has to respond to an unstructured situation composed of some ink blots. The construction technique, there are again different types of techniques in this. The construction technique, all those situations are included here in which a story is constructed by the examinee on seeing the stimulus material within some given time limit. So, suppose I show my client a picture of everybody in a market, and he has to form a particular story based on the market. So, what I'm trying to do is trying to understand his day-to-day lifestyle out of all this, because generally, when you're talking about a story, it is closely related to you and yourself, because this is what is running through your mind almost on a daily basis, right? The themes and modes of responding are considered relevant in such tests. The TAT, or the thematic perception test, the object relation tests, are some of the examples of constructive techniques. Some other tests, like draw a person test, are also included in this category. In these tests, in all these tests, the examinee constructs or produces a simple or a complex in statements in a story form, or draws some picture or a person. So all this is because they want to bring out what is there in your subconscious level. Completion technique is where I give you where the subject is given filling the blanks. No, things like I want, I feel excited about, I feel upset about, I like doing this, or I like this. Uh, all that is given in order to get responses that is generally given by the examinee, and these are all recorded and analyzed to get a picture of the individual's personality. Suppose, for example, Rota's incomplete sentence blank. Some people consider it to be a semi-projective technique as well. Expressive technique. These include those tests where some manipulative tasks are used by the examinee to depict his or her personality. Some interactions with the given material is the theme of these techniques. So suppose you're given um, again what Ritika does. She's giving you a blank piece of paper and asking you to draw. It is generally your subconscious that holds onto your hand and makes you draw, paint, or if I'm giving you a piece of clay, what you make out of it, all that comes in from your subconscious. Again, this is trying to make you feel very expressive. I think dance therapy also comes under this. I'm not exactly sure. I'll get back to you on that. Anybody has any doubt?
Partly yes, partly no. I mean, the dance therapy part.
Yeah, partly. See, again, it's an expressive technique, right? Soundarya should know more about this. These, okay. Common expressive techniques include role playing, finger painting, play, drawings, all these, right? The
Yeah,
characteristic
actually, dance
feature,
therapy, yes, dance therapy does come into expressive techniques, art
expressive
therapy
techniques. Yeah,
also.
art
Even
therapy.
there's theater as well. There's
Yeah.
anything related with expressing self-expression It's more about expressive technique.
Okay, thank you so much. The characteristic features of expressive techniques is that the examiner pays much attention to the manner in which the given materials are manipulated by the examinee. I see how a ball of clay has been molded by Ratika to create something. It can be either a very, what do you say, a very disturbing model that she's done or a very beautiful model that she's done. It will also talk about her state of mind. Rorschach ink blot test. Rorschach ink blot test was developed in 1921 by the Swiss psychiatrist Hermann Rorschach. It consists of 10 ink blots, 5 in black and white. Uh, that is 5 in black ink and white background, while the other 5 are colored with a white background. The Rorschach test of is a measure of both intellectual and non-intellectual personality traits. While developing the technique, Rorschach experimented with a large number of ink blots, which were administered to different psychiatric groups. On the basis of such clinical observation, various psychiatric syndromes that differentiate response characteristics were taken up in the scoring system. In this test, the subjects are asked to simply state whatever each ink blot looks to them. The responses are then scored by the psychologists using predetermined categories on key factors such as color, shape, movement, whether the whole or a part of the ink blot has been seen, and whether the response is given in content to the whole or to particular details in the ink blot. Okay, so as it is very clearly mentioned that it is these are the rubrics of judging whether of scoring the particular person who's done ink blot test. Again, to be honest, there is no particular key that is there to Rorschach ink blot test, as this person has passed away before he can give you an answer sheet to this particular test or this scoring key for this particular test. These blots are frequently used in personality description, diagnosis of mental disorders, or behavior prediction. Suppose you go to a child and show him this ink blot test. He'll come up with creative and beautiful things like, oh, this is a cloud, this is a fairy dancing, this is a ballerina, this is a butterfly, this is a bird, and all that. But if you go to a mentally disturbed person and show him an ink blot, he'll talk about murder, killing, blood, gruesome stuff, and all that, right? So you can decide as to what kind of personality this person has just by looking at the answers that is given to the ink blot. Okay, the Rorschach test is a combined set of three components: performance, proper, inquiry, and scoring. Administration of the Rorschach test. Now, the administration of the Rorschach test can be put up into two stages as given below, right? Performance proper, it is where the examinee is asked to get seated comfortably and a rapport is established between the interviewer and the interviewee, or the examiner and the examinee, or the psychologist and the client. The first plate is then handled to the client or handed to the client with the questions of what do you think this could be. During the process, the examinee needs to be careful about the following things: reaction time, which means the time gap between the card presentation and the examinee's response. Exclamation and comments are excluded from the scoring. So the answer is there, but in which tone he gives the answer or what comment comes after or before the answer is not taken into consideration. The position of the card is also taken into account while examinee is responding, and it is scored as such. If you see, there is these particular arrows showing downwards, upwards, left, right, and all that, and depending on the direction, the ink blot also changes its appearance, right? So depending on which angle that they saw the ink blot in, also determines the answer that comes from your interviewee or your client. The response are recorded verbatim with the reason for the reason that the examiner can read it and analyze the same effectively. So if I'm taking the no, taking a note of what my client is saying, I won't record it on a megaphone or something, or my phone recorder or something. I'll write it down, or I'll make the person write it down under the card that I give him. The total time for which the card is kept by the subject is also recorded. So the minute I give my client a ink blot card, I'll start recording the time to see how long it takes for them to come up with an answer. The time lapse between the presentation of the card and the first response of the subject is called the reaction time. On completion of the first plate, the second plate is given. Okay, bye, Jiba. On completion of the first plate, the second plate is given to the examinee, and similarly, all 10 plates are presented in a sequential manner. The total number of responses is also termed as response productivity ratio and is coded as R. On Rorschach protocol, for most adults, score varies from 15 to 30. Vague and uncertain responses of the client is noted down to be clarified in the second stage of administration, that is the inquiry stage. In the inquiry stage, that is the second stage, uh, it is taken up after the obtaining all the responses of 10 cards during your performance proper. And the basic purpose of conducting inquiry is to collect all the necessary information for accurate scoring of response. Here, a location sheet is presented before the examinee or the client, and they are asked to locate the part, sorry, the part of the basic on the basis of which he has responded. So you're taking a certain ink blot, and you'll be like, "Where is the wing of this fairy?" Because you'll the answer is right there. He'll have to point out where he saw what he saw to say it is a wing of a fairy. So as to main okay, this is done so as to maintain a permanent record of the area of the blot used by the subject in responding. The questions framed for the inquiry stage are based on the examiner's skill and expertise. So if I'm just a beginner, there's a different way of how I interpret the client's answer. If I have at least 10 years, 20 years of experience, there's a different way I interpret what my client gives me. So there's a difference in my skill and expertise as well. Scoring of the Rorschach test. Major difference among the various scoring systems of the Rorschach test flourished in 1930 to 1960. There is also a focus of concern for Rorschach's interpretation based either on the content of the responses or on their formal characteristics such as location, determinants, form quality, and the various quantitative summaries derived from the responses. That is the content. Scoring of the location is important. Location refers to the part of the blot with which each response of the subject is associated. All right. The form quality of the responses may depict the precision with which the response match the location used. The treatment of the content also varies from Rorschach system to another, except for some major regularly employed categories. I'm not going to read the entire thing because it's going to take a little long, but you get it, right? Most of it is based on where the person has seen the ink blot and given your answer and what is going on in the back of his mind. To briefly state about this test, it can be concluded that more research still needs to be conducted to invent a standard method of administration and scoring of your Rorschach test. This is only because Rorschach had passed away before he could give a proper answer. The Holzman ink blot test. Before I move on, is there anything that I can answer if anybody has any doubts?
No, Vasudha, you're good.
All right, let's continue. There's a little, only little left. Okay, Holzman ink blot test. Holzman developed the ink blot test known as the Holzman ink blot test in the year 1961. The test was developed by Holzman in order to remove the inherent technical difficulties of the Rorschach test. And there are two parallel forms, A and B, having 45 cards, both in color and achromatic, and markedly asymmetric. That means these cards are not identical to each other. One response per card is taken by the respondent. Each response is followed by by a twofold simple question. Where was the percept represented in the blot? That is, where are you looking at the blot to give your answer, and what percept suggests about the blot? What are his comments about the blot? All the responses were classified under 22 response variables. So no matter how many people you test, according to what what Holtzman says is, he's done this test on hundreds of people, and no matter how many answers he's taken about these 45 cards, all his answers come under 22 categories only, or 22 variables only. It has been found by many researchers that Holzman test appears to be better standardized than Rorschach's test. Obviously, because Rorschach wasn't there to give us the proper way of scoring his particular test, right? Also, also the scorer's reliability of the Holzman ink blot test is highly satisfactory. Validity. Wait, what? Also, the scorer reliability of the Holzman ink blot test is highly satisfactory I really don't understand the statement. Okay, I'm skipping it. It has also overcome the problem of productivity ratio by specifying the number of responses. We move on to TAT. TAT is your thematic apperception test, which was developed by Henry Murray and his colleagues Morgan and Murray. It consists of 20 pictures which are in black and white, and it holds a picture which shows people in a very chaotic situation or ambiguous situation. Ambiguous meaning not without clarity. So generally, people walking, or people in situations when they're in between two tasks, which do not have a clarity on what they're exactly doing. Okay. After showing these pictures, a story is to be told by the client about the person in the picture or the people in the picture. And generally, what they have to do is they'll have to form a hero, and they have to tell who the hero of the picture is. And they have to when you're talking about hero, they'll have to specify which gender they belong to, and they should also see if they're identifying themselves with the person that they call the hero or the heroine. The content of the stories is to be analyzed in reference to Murray's lists of press, needs and press. Achievement, affiliation, and aggression are examples of need, whereas press refers to the environmental factors that facilitate or interfere with their need satisfaction. However, TAT has been used extensively in research of personality, but the high variations in the administration and scoring procedures associated with TAT has made it quite difficult to investigate the psychometric properties of the TAT. Nevertheless, the value of TAT has been confirmed, and also the clinical utility of various versions of TAT, both for traditional and specific applications, has been established. So TAT is basically, according to the textbook, says that it is better than your Rorschach and your Holzman ink blot test. The sentence completion tests is where I give small bits of information, like I feel very, and I see how my client is answering. So I say, I wish my mother. What can you give me from that? What is the statement that you would give me from that? What would you fill with that? I wish my mother dash. Anybody?
Good health.
Awesome. Okay, so basically, what I can say is either that you're wishing your mother to be extremely healthy, or if she's undergoing certain ailment at this particular point of time. This is just an example, Mridula ji. No offense, touch gold, your mom should be very healthy. Okay, so when it says, I wish my mother good health, that means the person who's saying this is either thinking about the time when the person that they're talking about is thinking of their mother when they're ailing with a certain problem, or it is that there is no problem at all and they still want their mom to be very healthy. Okay, the subject is asked to complete the sentence the way he or she
Sudha,
desires. Yeah.
yeah. So even these days, especially after this COVID has come, pandemic. So if we wish someone about their birthday on their birthday, like happy birthday. So we are also including health. If you just
Of
see,
course, of course, of
right?
course. See,
Yeah.
again, it is all about the way the person is talking about, right? As
Yes.
I said, it doesn't really have to be that if I say that I wish my mom a
Right. Only
good
on
health.
not only this particular day, but for ever. Like yeah.
Exactly, exactly. She doesn't have to be ill at that particular
Yes.
point of time to say that I wish my mom a good health. She could be normal. She doesn't need to have a problem. You're generally saying that I wish for my mother to have good health because I want to see her live for a long period of time.
Mm.
It can be a very general statement, or it can be that the person's mother is currently in a particular health issue. It can go either way, right?
Yes.
The subject is asked to complete the sentence the way he or she desires. In a draw in sorry in the draw a person and house tree person, the client is supposed to draw the named item on a white sheet. So this is basically trying to get you to concentrate and try to draw or see how you interpret this particular word that we give you. Limitations of the projective tests. Projective tests are basically subjective in nature, and the interpretation of the answers of clients need deep analytical and artistic traits. Reliability and the validity related problems are always exist in the projective tests. There is no standard grading scale for the projective tests. As I said, most of them couldn't come up with a proper grading scale. There is no proper scoring key. A person's varying mood may decide the person's answer, which may vary considerably from one day to another. Now, I think this kind of a problem is there all throughout your psychological assessments, where your person's suppose the person has a very bad day, your answers also will be accordingly. If the person has an extremely good day, but the answers also will vary accordingly. So I'm guessing until unless the person is very depressed or is always very happy, your answers generally change from one day to another most of the time. Some situational variables, like your examiner's physical characteristics, are likely to influence the response of the projective techniques. It has also been seen that the changed instructions on the part of the examiner also influences the examinee's score on the projective techniques to a great extent. So, suppose, say, the person who's examining the client is a very huge person. He's 6 feet tall, somewhere around 100 kgs. He's very big and very scary looking. The person's answers are also going to change because impressions last, right? Impressions have a great influence on how you think at that particular point of time. If the person is skinny and not so frightening, also, there's a huge difference. Suppose, say, you put a puppy in front of the interviewee or the client when you're taking this examination, his mood is also going to change, right? The way he's looking at the environment around him is also going to change. Otherwise, if you put a crocodile or a lion in front of him and you'll be like, take an answer, give the assessment, his answer is going to be influenced because he's in fear. All these things are a part of how the person is, right, in a particular situation. Your environment also affects you. Finally, in words of Eisner, projective techniques can be summarized as those in which relationship between projective indicators and personality traits have not been demonstrated by any empirical evidence. That means there is nothing that gives it proper solid numerical evidences, right? A number of evidences show that most studies of projective techniques are guided by methodological flaws or ill designs. Projective techniques are not guided by any consistent, meaningful, and testable theories. Yeah, no problem, Leela. Bye. There is no evidence showing a relationship between the global interpretation of projective techniques by experts and psychiatrists. Generally, projective techniques have poor predictive ability regarding failure of or success in various walks of life. Now, the rest of this is pretty simple. Your behavioral assessment. Behaviorists assume that personality is a composite set of learned responses to stimuli in the environment. They undertake to watch such behavior as preferred as a preferred method of study. One of these methods is a direct observation that requires the psychologist to observe the client while engaged in their ordinary or daily routine, such as your school, your workplace, and other natural settings. Among other methods often used by behavioral therapists are rating scales and frequency counts. In a rating scale, either the psychologist or the client assigns a numeric rating or some specific behavior. On the other hand, in frequency count, the frequency of certain behaviors is specified in a time limit is counted. That means if I'm getting aggressive or angry 10 times in a 1 hour, that is taken down, that is noted down, and it is counted, and the things are done based on that. Limitations of this behavioral assessment. Observe bias or observer's bias is is major limitation in the behavioral assessment. So they say, the beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. This is same thing. If you're talking about your own child or your own parents or your own siblings, the way they observe, the way the psychologist observes is going to be in a different way. They'll be like, no, they can't do anything wrong. But if you're looking at your enemy, no matter how much good they're trying to do, it's going to be wrong. In observational method, there is no control over the external environment, and this may lead to interpret the events in a fruitless direction. All right. And we move on to personality inventories. Personality inventories is a printed form that consists of a set of statements or questions applying to human behavior. The list of questions is a standard one and requires specific answers such as yes, no, and cannot. Remember your Bell's adjustment. No, not your Bell's adjustment. Oh yeah, sorry. Your Bell's adjustment. When you're talking about your answer key, it said yes, no, maybe, or yes, no, not certain. It's something like that, right? So this also is like that only. All the questions that are given are in that kind of format only. All right. The next few lines talks about which kind of tests you can give to do this. Your introversion, extroversion, your MBTI are generally common amongst these particular inventories, your personality inventory. Your MMPI2, that is your Minnesota Multifaceted Personality Inventory, version 2, or the MMPI is the most common personality inventory. It tests specifically the abnormality inventory. It tests specifically the abnormal behavioral patterns in a personality. This consists of 567 statements, such as I believe I am being plotted against. Okay, so the answers are either true, false, or cannot say. It has 10 clinical scales, 8 validity scales besides the various subscales. So there are different subscales in this particular test which talk about different aspects of your personality, ranging from mild to more serious disorders such as schizophrenia, depression are assessed using this particular uh, inventory. Okay. Limitations of personality inventories. Personality inventories have certain advantages over projective tests and interviews, in the sense that interview inventories are standardized, because you see projective tests do not have a particular scale in which you can score, but however personality inventories have a particular scale, they're standardized and you can compare. Also, observer's bias or the observer bias and the interpretation bias are not possible due to the objective frame. That means, suppose you want to give a test to someone and you do not want to be biased, or you're not or the answers, you cannot be biased because you generally do not take the name of the person, you just take the initial, and you do not know the person that you're giving it to. Otherwise you'll give it to your friend and you'll be like, give it to random people, I just want the answers. Then you do not know who this person is. So there's no interpretation bias or observer's bias that is happening in this. And it is very objective in nature. Inventories are also superior to projective tests in the terms of validity and reliability. Validity and reliability in research, we've gone through this, which says that no matter how many times or how many ever people you give it to, it is going to give you the same kind of results. However, there are some problems in the inventories too. Even though good at validity end, some people still fake their answers and response in socially acceptable ways. Also, some people follow regular course of answering the statements without actually considering them, and there are sorry there as others sorry whereas others may pick statements to answer at random rather than answering each and every statement. Suppose, remember your multiple choice questions that you had for entrance exams. If you do not know the answer, you would randomly tick something. Otherwise, you'll just choose a pattern that you're going to answer this way and you'll start answering like that. Many people do the same for even these inventories because there are only three answers, right? Yes, no, and cannot decide. They'll take it in that particular manner, because of which your answers are not going to be correct. And in some cases, if the person is being very bad, but they do know what is right, they'll just tend to take the correct answer instead of what they're actually going through, and you won't get the correct answer. So, all these are other factors why this particular test can fail. Though the tasks of personality assessment and measurement is a skilled and sophisticated one, today predictions of behavior are based on measurements of personality. Now, that is the end of the chapter. Is there anything that I can answer? Any doubts?
Can we stop the recording?